That's a very cool picture of the staffs, don't you think?
Yeah, it's even got our own theme tune as well. I like it.
Absolutely banging picture. So, Rory, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. You're going to be doing a mashup of one of my favourite recipes today. A recipe that is extremely unique for Lee Stafford education. So I'm very excited to see how you go about mashing this one up. So over to you, Rory. Take it away.
Perfect. Right, yep. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining on this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So, as Lee said, yeah, we're going to do some cutting today, and we're going to be mashing up the long disconnection. So, the long disconnection, yeah, as Lee says, is a really cool technique. Gives a lot of dimension to haircuts. But what we've done today is we've using the basics of the long disconnection section pattern, but we're going to twist it a little bit and kind of take a bit of the long out of it, and we're going to go for something that's a more bob length and a little bit more of the mullet shag that we're seeing quite a lot and a lot of people are asking for. The reason that I've chose to do that with the long disconnection is because the sectioning pattern lends itself perfectly for something like that. The way that we can intricately put long and short layers in to give a real difference in terms of texture and dimensions, I think you'll find makes it a really easy way for you to be able to create the shag mullet type looks. And as we know, we like to kind of have them tools in our back pocket that we can do on our clients very quickly, very easily, and we can practice very easily. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to kind of get into the haircut, take you through from where I am at the minute. So I've done a bit of pre-sectioning, and then we'll get into do some cutting. So initially what we've done, and anytime you want to stop or ask any questions, please feel free to do so. But yeah, initially what we've done is we've done exactly the same pre-section. So we've done the high point. So we found the high point, which is the top part of the head, so where all the hair falls from in with gravity. We've then done our horseshoe section. So we've gone from the recession, round and under the crown, and then back round and back to the other recession, and that's given us our horseshoe section. We've then found our high point and made our first triangle section, come from our high point to the recession, and from our high point to the recession. So that gives us a triangle section. And then all we did then was follow our line backwards and backwards. And what that's given us is these 4 triangle sections in the horseshoe section. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the final step for that top part is we take a little bit out of the point of each, and it gives us this little bit of hair at the top that's going to be our guide for the top section. So that was our sectioning for the top. Then underneath it's all left out because this is what we're going to start to cut first. So that was sectioning. Very easy, very straightforward. And like we always say with sectioning, the more you practice it, the better you're going to get at it, and it's going to make your cuts a lot quicker and a lot more simple. And it's just a really key tool I think we all should be looking to be using in our cutting, 100%.
Rory, I'll just answer this question from Tracy. She says, how many people you get coming into the salon for asking this? And Laura's asked a similar question. How often do you use this recipe in the salon? Well, the thing is, I have been doing this recipe now for God about, I'd say about 10 years. You know, we kind of, I wouldn't say invented it because someone could have always done something very similar in the past. But we kind of developed this recipe for Lee Stafford education. And it's not so much that people come in and asking for it, but a lot of people come into the salon with long hair, especially people with curly hair, but all sorts of clients with long hair. And they say, you know, it's going very flat, my hair. You know, is there anything you could do to keep the length, but to kind of, you know, give the layers a bit of oomph? And this is the perfect recipe for that. So you have to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I know Rory will be doing that. But it's one of them that people won't ask for, but we can certainly recommend.
Yeah, definitely. To expand that, yeah, from what Lee was just saying, yeah, no one's going to come in and ask for this specific technique. But if we have this in our locker, this is something we know we can go to so easily that's going to create so many different looks. So what I've done is I've started at the back, and what we're going to do is first do our radial section, which is going to be our guide length for the underneath section. So this is where the look can be used for, the techniques are can be used for so many different looks, because this first cut can massively change how the haircut's going to look eventually. So For someone that wants quite a soft look, we might go for quite a longer bit of hair. So we hold the comb out. We might chop it to the full length of a comb, or we might chop it to a 3/4 of a comb. But for me, I'm looking for something a bit stronger today. So I've actually cut it to half the length of a comb, so it's quite short in here. So that's already going to create internally some quite short layering for me in there. So I've stood behind, body behind, so I'm not doing any form of over direction. And it's just coming up to me. A key thing for this, we always have to remember, is we need to be elevating the hair up. We're going to have problems if we're pulling the hair straight out or even pulling it down, because if it's not in elevation, we're going to start to get hard lines in the hair. And for us, what we want is this to be all soft and melted. So the first key thing is when you're working around the section, make sure you're always elevating it up to the same point. The elevation can change depending on what you want. Always elevate to the same point and make sure you're in elevation so we're not getting any hard lines. And once I've found my guide length, I'm then just going to work around the head. So following each section, I'm going to make sure I'm stood behind my section. I've elevated up to the same place. And then I just cut. And then my feet move again. So I'm coming around my section. And I'm just carrying on this radial section. So I'll move the head so you can still see what I'm doing, but I would be moving my body every time. So I'm going around the side. And every few times, all I do to double check myself is I pop my comb back in, make sure I'm still on half a comb length. I am, and then I can carry on cutting. So I'm going to work that all the way to the front up until where we have. So in the long disconnection, we do disconnect a very front section, just as a little bit of an extra safety net plus bit we can play with at the end. So I'm going to work up until I get just before that disconnection.
Just want to say a few shout outs to all the gang at Chichester, Laura and Amber and Tracy. You're on these masterclasses every week. Laura, Alex, Emma, Jamie Lee Curtis, Bon, who's the trainer down in Chichester. Hello, guys. We've got some new people joining us today from Nottingham College. So, hello, Wenda. And there was someone else as well. There was Emma. How you doing, Emma? And we've got a question here from Laura. She's asked you, Rory, how? No, wrong one. Sorry, we've already answered that one. What's your favourite thing about doing a mullet from Amber?
I mean, mullets are actually quite, one, they're very fun to cut because it's quite a, there's a lot of technique to them, but they're also very expressive. But at the same time, I don't know, when they first started to come back in, I think a lot of people were like, what, the mullet? But there's so many different ways now that you can do the mullet and create it that they're just fun to cut, particularly for someone who's a cutter and not a colorist. A lot of the times cutting, we're doing a lot of the same, people are having a long balayage and then trimming their hair, and it all just gets a little bit boring. But this has just been something that's really allowed hairdressers to start to have a bit of fun again with their hair cutting. And as I say, you can do the mullet shag on long hair, you can do it on shorter hair, you can do it on the type of length that we're doing it on today. So I just like cutting different shapes for me personally. So the chance to be able to cut a different shape and have fun cutting it is the key thing for me, really.
Tracy's asked, how difficult did you find this particular haircut the first time you did it, Rory?
So the mullet or the long disconnection as a regular. So as a long disconnection, the regular one, I think once you get to grips with leaving it, once you've cut it, it's a very strict, and you're just quite methodical with it, and you don't go too fast. I think it came to me quite quickly, because them are the two key things I think anyone would struggle with. That we're so used to wanting to cross-check and wanting to double-check everything, and we have to get quite used to just leaving it because we're doing them scooping out. But if we're methodical in how we do it, so we do it step by step and don't rush it, I find personally that it is quite an easy cut to do. And moving on from that then, to then move that then into another haircut. So that's the key thing for me, because it is so well broken down and the fundamentals of the cut are so well explained. It's then very easy for me to create another mashup of that haircut, because the basics of it, are so easy to take on board. So yeah, I think it's like anything, practice it and then you will find it comes to you nice and easily. So what I've done now is I've worked all of my radial sections through. So now I'm taking vertical sections down, like the same as we do in the normal recipe. But instead of them coming through and doing these big scooping motions out, I'm going to have a fixed finger angle at 45 degrees coming upwards. So it's a diagonal upwards finger angle. And I'm just going to take it off at that length. So we're keeping the length quite short still. So then carry on to the rest of the section. All the way down to the bottom. On shorter hair, you might find some of this hair would fall away. On longer hair, on longer hair, it's not. We're going to end up cutting all of it. So I'm going to come through again, find my section, come through. My fingers on a 45-degree angle. I'm just going to come down. And what this is creating is, if you imagine, we've got all the shortness here. It's going to scoop, and then the length's going to start to come out. So we're starting to create that shag mullety shape at the bottom where it almost scoops into the head because we've got the shorter layers that are scooping way out. But then because we're still elevating up and we've got a diagonal finger angle, we're still keeping length towards the bottom. So we will still have length coming out at the end here. And then all I'm going to do then is work round one side exactly the same and round the other side exactly the same. But following, I will be checking my previous section, so I'm keeping the length the same either side. So on to the next section. Do exactly the same. So do that and then just clip that hair out of the way for a second. Find my section. Hair comes elevated up, diagonal finger angle 45 degrees. I can see my guide from the previous section. Then I'm just gonna, and if we wanted to make it softer, we could point cut, we could use another type of tool. So we could use a razor or we could use thinning shears. But the key thing again for it is, as long as we're elevating upwards, it's all going to be soft. That's the key thing for this haircut for me is, as long as we're always elevating, it's all going to remain soft. As soon as we start to get lazy, drop our elbows, drop where we are, that's when hard lines start to come in because there's not enough elevation. So that's when you're going to start to come to problems in any haircut like this, where you're trying to create a load of softness and them light layers that we're really looking for.
So that section you did, Rory, that was like a uniform layer, wasn't it? The same length all the way around.
Yeah, so first one was like a uniform layer, following the shape of the head all the way around. It was a horizontal section, which often we're not very used to doing as hairdressers. But yeah, horizontal, just pulling it out and just elevate. I elevated it up to me, so I elevated it probably on a 45 in relation to the room. So it was coming upwards, just to give me an extra bit of softness. But as I say, it can be elevated to anywhere. Just be careful not elevating it straight out or below straight out, because you can start to get a bit too much hardness in the shape and we can start to get lines that we don't want. But again, this is just following then the same routine all the way around. As long as I can see my guide, as long as I'm elevating upwards, that 45-degree finger angle, so that shape's moving out like that, so then it's going to come in and scoop out like that. So we're going to get the short layers in here, scoop, and then come out like that.
It's quite simple, because really what you're doing there, you've put a line all around the top, a nice slither line, and then you're putting little layers up, and it's like you're cutting a square line on the top. And that simple square line is going to give you all that curve that you're talking about because of the shape of the head, right?
Exactly, yeah, that's 100% it. Yes, so we're using that shape of the head that comes in and goes out, and we're just following the shape of that head, and we're accentuating and keeping the length just by having that extra bit of a diagonal finger angle at the end, which gives us that extra bit of length. But I could cut this completely horizontal. I wouldn't need the diagonal finger angle. It's just going to give me an extra bit of length at the end. It's going to give me a bit more length to play with when I come to it.
Classic situation, Rory. If you'd look at this haircut at the end, you think, God, how did they do that? And really, all you've done is brought it up and cut a straight line.
Very, very basic. Yeah, you would. That's 100% it. Someone in the street or someone looking at it would be like, what has gone on there? That looks amazing. But it's just a lot of repetition of the same thing. And as long as you're disciplined in elevating to the same place and having the same diagonal finger angle. It's just literally repeat, and then you can just see how the shape's starting to just take it all the way out of here, but we've still got all of this length that's coming down here. So we've got all these short layers in here, but the length is still all the way down there. Obviously now we have to be careful because we're coming to the hairline. So if we were doing this on a client who wanted short layers, wanted to keep a length, but didn't want a mullet, around the hairline, we might have to start to do things like over direct backwards, because we are going to follow the shape of the hairline by bringing the hair up. But because we want to create the mullet and have even a bit more layering around the face, I'm just going to carry on exactly the same. But always think when you get to around the back of the ear, when the hairline starts to change shape, think about what you're doing and if it will follow the hairline or not. And if so, then think what you can do to protect against losing too much hair around there. And that's things like leaving out disconnected pieces, over directing backwards, things we can do that's going to keep an extra bit of length for us to play with. So again, so as you can see, it's a smaller section here, but still exactly the same. So hair's coming up, diagonal finger angle, and as it drops down, you can see it just starts to get shorter. And remember, we're not going into that disconnected piece that we did at the very front, so we will have a bit of hair to play with at the front anyway. So there's that diagonal finger angle. Hair's coming all off, and you can see how it's now starting to go a bit short because of the hairline, but we've got that shape coming in and tapering down, which for the traditional mullet is the kind of look we would be going for. So now we're going to turn our lady around and do exactly the same, working the other way as well. Does anyone?
How long does it take to grow out a mullet?
Oh, depends how short you cut the mullet in the first place.
Or how short you want to cut the hair after.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I won't worry about stuff like that. If someone's coming in for a mullet, the consultation, I think there is key. If your client's already saying, how long will it take me to grow it out? I think you need to have a bit more of a consultation and really figure out, is it something they're wanting to go for? Because for something like a mullet, which is quite a strong haircut for me, you don't want to be doing it like half-assed. I kind of think you want to go for it or not. Of course, we can use some of the techniques that we have in a mullet to create haircuts, but if they really want a strong mulleted look, then the last thing you want them to be saying straight away is, how long is it going to take me to grow out? And again, like Lee said, it just depends on how short are you going to cut it, how long, what's the cut going to be afterwards, where do they want to grow it to? Completely dependent on all of those factors. So,
and would you say also, Rory, that you can tell the kind of, I mean, look, I know there's always exceptions to the rule, but you can tell the kind of person that's going to want a mullet, can't you?
Yeah. And you can always ask them, you can know who's gonna rock it and who's gonna, the clients who are gonna manage it well themselves and who are gonna actually be able to style it out as it needs to be styled out, and who have that look. And there's nothing wrong with saying to your client or guest or whatever you call them, sat in the chair, if you don't think it's going to be for them and you think it is a bad idea, as a professional, we almost have a duty to explore that with them and be like, what is it about the mullet that you like? Is it just a section of it? Is it just a short layering? Is there potentially something we could do with layers that was going to create a similar thing, but you don't have such a strong feel? So the consultation really has to be strong at that point, and you have to have a really good understanding of your clients for you to be able to deal with something like that, I guess. So coming all the way around to the front. So you can see then what we've got is almost this shape that tapers. We've got quite a lot of length back here, and on the cut I'll show you afterwards once it's dry. I've taken a lot of this off, but you could leave this if you wanted. Mullets, I think a lot of the time wouldn't go much longer than this really, unless you're going for something really different. But you've got all this then through the sides, this like how it tapers up. And remember, we've got them front sections that we've disconnected, so they're completely separate to everything else, and we're going to cut them when it's dry. So that is the underneath cut done, apart from some refining when it's dry. So now what we're going to do is going to move to the top section, and we're going to follow the long disconnection pattern exactly the same again. So underneath is done to a certain extent, and we've got now these 4 triangle sections on the top. And remember, we have this one long piece of hair here that's the middle. I'm going to follow exactly the same again. So I'm going to take it to half the length of a comb. So again, this depends on obviously the length of your comb and everything. So for me, it's going to be there. I'm just going to take a snip. Key things about this, it can't be too chunky of a section, even though we want to be able to see it. We don't want it to be too chunky because we don't want it to be too weighty one way or another. It has to be coming up directly from the high point of the head. And if you want to double check that, remember, you can always pop your comb flat on the head. And when the comb starts to balance horizontally like that, you know you're on the point of the head and you know you're in the right place.
Thanks, mate.
So then what we're going to do now is work each section, doesn't matter which section where you start, we're going to work each section, clip the underneath of where you're coming from so you're not going to get too confused. I'm going to come down the middle of the section first. Now again, all I'm going to do is take it, I'm going to turn it around so you can see my finger angle. And all we're going to do is bring it all the way up. And again, instead of the scooping, we're just going to do a diagonal finger angle. So my finger angle is exactly the same. It's on a diagonal 45. I'm just going to work the hair upwards like that. So then this hair then is going to fall over the shorter length we have underneath there, but in a much more compact way than we're used to doing on the long disconnection. Then pick up the next part of that section. Find my guide from the top again. All the way up, elbows up, find my guide, fingers on a diagonal 45, and then we're cutting. And again, we could be point cutting, we could be razor cutting this, but because we're elevating, it's absolutely fine also just to blunt cut it as well.
So you're going right from the middle there, aren't you? You're pivoting round, is that correct?
My high point there, and I'm just pivoting round almost like a terrace chocolate orange, and everything's coming up to the middle point. And it's on that finger angle of a diagonal 45, so we're getting a bit more length towards the outside that's going to sit over these layers over here. So we've done that first section, so now I'm going to come to the front section. I'll do the same again. Take a center section out of the middle of it, then elevate that hair up, find our little guide length that's here. So that's always going to be like the radial section underneath was our like key thing to keep us on track. On this one, this little bit at the top is going to keep us on track and make sure we're doing exactly the same length every time. Find the guide there. We can see the guide from the previous section. Then cut in. And it's just, again, someone said earlier about how often do you use this? Like, you know, if you learn this technique and understand it really well, parts of it you'll be using all the time because it's just such a easy, simple technique to really break down and then start to create so much interest and texture in hair, which is sometimes quite daunting, particularly when you first come into hairdressing and you start talking about short layers and long layers and how we're going to create them.
It's looking nice already, Rory.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I mean, the one I've got finished is I've dried it and given it a bit of a style, but when I cut that one and then I left her overnight, when it had just dried with a little bit, because these heads are quite good heads and they do have a little bit of natural curl and texture like normal hair does, or a lot of normal hair does. And even just when it dries naturally and I hadn't refined it or done any extra cutting on it, all the hairs just melted in so nicely together and blended so nicely together. You actually I didn't need to do anything to it. It was almost a bit like, oh God, what am I going to do extra? Because it looks really nice already, just melted and just a bit wavy and natural, and all the layers were just seamlessly melting together. You couldn't see where one thing started and one thing stopped. Yeah,
tell me this, Rory. How often do you do haircuts and not texturize the hair? I mean, do you find like you have, by habit, you have to go in and start texturizing, or do you just look at it and think it looks great, doesn't need it?
Yeah, I think hairdressers definitely have to know when not to cut hair. We do love to cut hair, and sometimes we cut hair when we don't need to. But I think it's just playing with and understanding when and where and what you need and what doesn't need. Like for me, another really interesting and like one where I use not texturizing but like thinning a lot is when people when people want like one length bobs. I will always 9 times out of 10 in the end go in and soften the ends off just to get a nicer feel on the end. So I'll still leave it chunky, but I'll just, for my personal preference, go into the ends to just soften them off so it's not just too like hard on the bottom. But I only found that from just personal preference, and just I kept on cutting one length bobs and they just felt a little bit like schoolgirly when I'd finished them. It just felt a little bit too chunky so on the end. So I just started to soften the ends off, even on like a strong, what you would class as, I always call it Sassoon's really strong bob. I find it almost looks stronger, but sits much nicer by still just not point cutting on an angle, so you're kind of getting rid of length, but just going in very finely and softening off. So texturizing can be used in all ways, in all manners, and that's why, when we go back to it so many times, once you learn the principles of these recipes and you understand how to use them basic principles, that is when the fun as a hairdresser happens, because then you can start to play. And the one time when you cut this hair, you put loads of texture in it and you really see the difference in loads of texture. And then the next time you do it, you don't really do much texturizing at all, and you just leave it to be what it is. And then you kind of see the difference of what you're creating. I mean, so you can see now there, so we've got that guide length we had at the top, and then everything's falling from that. But you can see already this is what was happening to me. Just with it, I mean, take these pieces away because that's my disconnected pieces, but you can just see the really nice, soft, texturized shape and almost like the grown out bangs we're getting already around the face that we're going to play with a bit more. And you can see as it comes over the back of the head, you try to put that light on it a little bit more so you can see it a bit better. You can see that it's just seamlessly like blending in there. So you're not seeing, even though this length is this long down here and this layer's short here, then it gets longer. So let's actually turn the head to the side so you can almost see that. So if you think about it, we've got these extreme layers here, then it gets longer here, then in here gets shorter again, and then you've still got all this length down here, but then you put it all together and you can see exactly what we've done. We've got this short layers up here, scooped all that weight out of the middle, but we've kept all this length down here that we can either choose to keep or we can choose to get rid of. So that's the basic fundamental haircut. Is so you can use it in so many different ways, can't you?
I mean, it's so simple. A lot of the time people would have thought to get that shape that you're talking about, you'd have had to have done some obscure angle where you kind of cut it into the neck and then come out again. But
you've almost been in a salon doing a haircut type thing, yeah. What I do is, because I'm not going to cut this hair anymore because I'm going to go on to my other model, but what I will do is I will, once it's dried a little bit more, I'll take a picture of it and stick it on my stories just so everyone can see just exactly how it is, so you can see in detail a bit more the actual, how it blends so nicely together, because it really does. It's hard to see on this camera, but it does, in that just basic haircut, blends so nicely.
Looks
really
lovely.
Lovely shape to it.
It really is.
But what we did was dried it and styled it and took a bit of length off the bottom. I'll talk you through what I did, and then we'll do a bit of cutting to finish on this side as well. So yeah, so talk you through what we've got here. It's exactly the same haircut. So we've still got the short length at the top, then it gets longer, so you can see the angle where it gets longer, then gets shorter under here again, and then it then gets longer towards the bottom. But all I've done is I've come through the back first, and I've wanted to create a bit more of a harder line through here. So I did actually use my razor, but I just razor cut.
So is that like you've just done a one length above there with a razor?
Exactly, I've just done it. So the length we had here, or this length, I just picked a line, just took my razor and just did a one length above, so a hard line straight across that just give me this texture but hard finish, so kind of just to create a bit of a different shape. Come in through, I carried it on through the sides, and as I say, then I've just left our disconnected pieces, and the same through the front as well. This is all just as it's just dried, and I've just added a little bit of a smoother finish to it just so we can see it in a different look. And then I'm going to now do a bit of refining on this as a dry style. So the first thing that I want to refine is, we've got this grown out Bangsy look, which I actually quite like, but obviously it's a bit too long at the minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work from a center section, and I'm going to razor out a bit of this middle and then kind of work it into the side, so I'm still keeping all of the length. So just turn it to face me 1 second.
So from the front, they're the bits that were disconnected, are they?
Yeah, I'm going to cut them in a minute as well, yeah. So they're our disconnected pieces, so I'm going to play with them in a minute.
If you hadn't have left them out, them disconnected pieces, and you'd have just cut that like you've cut everything else around the back, would that have been a quarter around the front, Rory?
I'd have had quite a hard shaping around the face, because it had followed the hairline upwards, and it'd have almost shaped quite high, and would have had a lot of feather in here, which for the mullet actually is fine. I'm always of the camp of keep it and then we can lose it, rather than lose it in the first place and then go looking for it afterwards. So I'm going to cut a fringe. So for me personally, I always like to get in front of my client when I'm cutting the fringe. That's for the reason of if I'm trying to do it from the side, there's always a chance I'm going to be over directing. So spin your client to face you in the chair. We all have these chairs that turn these days. No one's in fixed chairs. So spin your client to face you. Get in front of your client so you can see what's going on. Even if you need to get them to stand up or you need them to get them to anything like that, I would definitely say be in front of your client while you're doing it. The first thing, I'm going to take this middle section here. So just very visually taken this section. I've just taken a section that sits over the nose visually, and I'm going to pinch the hair and then use my, like a serrated razor blade. And I'm going to use the nose bone as my guide. I'm just going to take this middle section and just work down, just so I'm taking enough hair off that it's just going to, I get almost a blunt line, but it's serrated, just so it's sitting, so I can turn it back to face you. So you can see that's just sitting on the nose there. So that's my main guide in the middle. So now what I'm going to do now is just work out from the side. So I pick the hair up from the side of it. Let's turn it a bit so you can see it. Pick it up, and I'm just going to very softly just slide outwards. So I'm moving downwards like that. So I'm keeping more length as I move outwards. And because this is quite layered anyway, I'm working it with my fingers as I go, so I can really see what's happening. So then let's just... And this is again where cutting becomes fun and creative, because we now have the fun to almost visually build something as we're going. And I've got all this lovely soft layering in behind here anyway, so nothing's too chunky or too bulky. I'm just carving out my actual fringe length. So once I start to kind of get happy with it, I then look to the other side. Do many people use razors in the? Because I know we do have. Do we have a razor cut in there?
I've got a razor one, yeah. We have. Do you
So
use a razor in the salon, Rory?
I use this, particularly a feather razor. I use a lot. I do have like the blunt razor, but I find that I'm using the razor a lot for texturizing. And with the texturizing, I just find these like feather type blades just really allow me to. It's almost like a bit of a pencil for me just to have some fun.
It looks very eloquent as you use it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the key things for it is make sure we're always having a nice fresh blade in there, because the worst thing your client ever wants is when they hear that.
Yeah.
But some people like to cut wet, some people like to cut it dry with a razor. I'm of the preference of either. I probably do more of the cutting dry than wet, but just whatever actually works for you and whatever you get your looks from. But you can see just very quickly with a razor, we can start to build that like arched effect, and I can, come in and just If I need to do sliced little bits and more pieces out.
So you're really, this is like you're just looking at it all the time.
Oh, this is just visual fun cutting now. And if you didn't want to use a razor, all we'd have done is that middle section would have point cut it. So we'd have come in at the nose and point cut that middle section. And then through the sides, I'd be doing exactly the same. I'd just be slicing hair out. So kind of closing my blades a little bit as I go, just slicing and just sculpting it around the face, looking at how the layers, working with my fingers to almost like massage the hair. So I'm starting to get the texture into it. Then I'd be coming over this side and doing exactly the same. And this is just detailing for you as a hairdresser yourself. And at this point you'd be talking to your client as well, and is this a good length? Do you want a bit more than that? Is that a bit too long? And then just working it as we see it go. So once you're getting happy with the shape, let's just turn it to face me again. Happy with the shape. I'm making sure, one thing I would always do when I'm doing stuff like this as well is, I would make sure that I then, once I'm happy with the shape, take the hair away and see how the fringe is sitting around the face if she ties the hair up. So that's another key thing for me is kind of, obviously a lot of people go to the gym these days, whatever. So when we're freehand cutting, we have to make sure we have balance when the hair's been taken away, even though we freehand cut it. So it's no good at looking nice when all the hair's down. Then she takes the hair up and one side looks a lot longer than the other because she's going to look a bit stupid when she's tied the hair up. So once you've sculpted it, take the extra hair away and then see what will be left when it's sitting around her face. And like this, it's nice for it to be sitting around jawline. So when she ties it up, she's got something that's framing her face. And then she's got all these nice soft layers that are coming onto her face. So she knows also she can tie her hair up and still have a really nice look. And, gives a lady then another look to her bow. So if she's going out, she can get her hair up and have something, a completely different look than when it's all down and like this out of the way. So that's a key thing. Once you've done your fringe, make sure you're taking the hair away so you're really seeing how it's sitting once the hair's off of the face as well. And then you might want to take a bit more length out at that time. Do we all struggle with fringes? Is it an easy thing for most people?
How do you find your fringes, guys? What's your favourite way to go about them?
Do we cut them wet? Do we cut them dry? Do we do both? So I'm quite happy with the fringe now. So the next thing I'm going to do is play into my disconnected piece on the side. And I'm actually going to put quite a bit of layering into these pieces. So I could choose to keep them chunky, but I'm actually going to take a little bit of length off of them to kind of carry on my mullet type of look. So I'm going to spin her slightly to the side so you can see. And all I'm going to do is where my long fringe is finished, I'm then going to pick up my disconnected piece. I'm just going to run the razor down and then just work it into my base length, which is here. I'm just working it into that base length. So all these layered pieces here, then it's just working into that base length there. So as it then comes across, this is all blending in. And I'm just carrying on this really shaped, mullety effect around the side here. And then I can break it all up even a bit more if I want to do. So just taking the razor through and just really feathering it off on the side. As you can see, so this was where our fringe was. The fringe is worked down. I've picked the fringe length and I've just started to take it out and just blend it through the side so we've got a really nice shape. So we'll do that same thing on the other side. So let's pop it this way so you can see. So I find my fringe length. Turn it a bit more. Find my fringe length. This is my disconnected piece. Same as the other side, we want to create quite a bit of layering. So find my guide length from the base that I've cut. And all I'm going to do here is find the length of where the fringe was and then just run the blade down. So I'm just going to join the two, but it's giving me a really broken line when I've joined the two together. So I've joined it into my baseline there, and then I'm then going to work some extra texture in. So I'm coming through and really texturizing this front part. So she is getting that really layered mullety look around her face. You can see that just starting to build them layers through the front.
Nice. Looks good. That's great. I mean, it's so simple, but very effective.
Really straightforward. So we've started to now, we've got that length in here, we've got a really peekaboo type fringe, working outwards to the sides. It's worked down, and we've got all of this, the strong baseline that's been razored, but then all of this layering around her face. So she's got that real mullety feel around these bits as well. And we can either accentuate that shape, or we can kind of, get rid of it. And then same through the back. I'm going to then use my razor again just to accentuate this shape. So I've kind of, because I've taken it shorter, I've lost a little bit of the scoop. So all I'm going to do is going to come in, and in the very bottom length, so I'll try to do it here so you can see, just visually going to be picking up sections. We're working down the hair, just taking fine pieces out, and then just stepping back and seeing the shape I'm creating. So thing for this maybe to remember is be very careful of going in horizontal, because you can take a lot of length off very quickly. So I go in a bit like a pencil. So I'm just really running fine bits of weight out, then always really assessing it to see kind of how much weight I've lost as I go. And again, the same, if you didn't want to be using a razor, I could be using my scissors, and I'd just be coming through and just taking little channels of hair out. So keeping it very vertical, so we're not making any gaps or any chunks in the hair. Just turn it this way now so you can see that. So just be coming down and just channeling very softly pieces of hair out. So, and what all this is doing is it's just compacting that hair a bit more. So we're getting a little bit more of that scoop again. So once we get these layers really going up here, and then we scoop out this down here, we're going to have a really nice, soft shape that's coming through that silhouette. And again, channel cutting, another really nice way to take weight out, another really nice thing to play with.
How's everybody feeling about this cut that Rory's done today? Let us know in the chat.
And again, now it's just a case of knowing when to stop cutting, because you could cut this all day long. Again, I don't think I need anything up here, but if you did have anything that felt chunky up here, all we need to do is find the bit that's chunky, elevate it up, and just take a little bit of weight at the ends if you want it to be even softer through the end. But because we've elevated, to be honest with you, I don't think it needs anything through there. I quite like how the length of the layers are looking.
Got a competition question today, guys. This is a very easy one. So make sure you're all ready. Okay? Easy competition question this week. Jamie Lee Curtis says she's loving it, Rory. Looks divine, Alex. I like the front. I like the front, prefer the tapered back. Yeah, this is all, you're making it your own now. I like the heavy length. I like texture, interior texture. Looks really good. Wendy, getting a lot of love here. Absolutely love the cut. Something you can have a lot of fun with. Okay, so the question this week, guys, for Elise Stafford goodie box full of hair care products is how many sections are there in the Lee Stafford Education Big and Bouncy Blow Dry? First person to answer, how many sections?
Oh.
Who's going to come in first? I love the cuts. Get a lot of love here. Laura, well done. 9 sections. So Laura, if you get your tutor, just give me a little email and just remind me of what your hair's like now. So I know you guys change your hair quite regularly.
So styling wise, just to finish, guys, what I talk you through how I did styling wise. So to style, all I used was the sea salt spray. So I thought this was really nice. Just sprayed it in when it was damp, scrunched a lot, and then just smoothed a little bit at the end. I then just used a little bit of a curling iron just to give it a little bit of texture and movement. Then to kind of accentuate the shape, all I've done is I've come through with a bit of a powder wax through the underneath of them shorter layers. So powder waxes are great for this type of shape because they can build a load of volume and texture. They don't weigh the hair down too much. Then I'm then going to just use a little bit of an actual wax. Just rub it right into my hands first, get it onto my fingertips, and then this is just going to come through and really start to break the shape up because we've got all them layers in there. We don't want to not see them. So them layers we want to really see. We can start to piece pieces. And again, really working with the texture of the hair. Get the same with the shape through the back. You know, we can kick her if we want. We can get in, we can start to compact that shape in a little bit with our wax, pieces, work the shape there. Really start to make it look very broken up. And then a little bit of like a slight oil to finish on the very, very way we've used that paste.
Very nice. Very nice.
So just to recap, remember what we did. So we've done the long disconnection sectioning pattern. So remember that sectioning pattern was the horseshoe with a high point and the 4 triangle sections. We've then done the halo section underneath and then the disconnected piece at the side. Our first cutting section, remember, we took it out on the halo section on a 45, elevating, and just worked all the way around the head, working the same length. Then everything just worked upwards on a diagonal finger angle, working around the head exactly the same, apart from them front sections we left out. We then came to the top of the head. We found our high point and took a short piece of hair from there. We then worked through our 4 triangles, again, just working everything up with a diagonal finger angle. So again, we got this length that was coming out and we just pivoted around the head. Then we dried the style that we talked about, and then we used our different texturizing techniques, so razors, channel cutting, thinning out, slicing, just to really start to create the shape we want. We talked about the fringe as well, how we can create these like peekaboo type looks with starting in the middle, cutting that length at like nosebone level, and then just freehand cutting our way out. Also remember, always you've got to check what it looks like when the hair comes away as well. And hopefully for you, that's given you the way of creating a bit of a mullet look. But more than that, hopefully you've got some techniques that you can use in all your haircuts, and you can start to understand again the principle of it all is once you understand the basics of what you're doing and you really nail that, that's when you can start to have fun and really
love it. Brilliant. Love it, Rory. It looks super, super cool, doesn't it? And the thing what I really like about it is you can imagine that on a young teenager or a more mature woman, just how, you know, it would have a different feel by how you finish it, right?
Definitely, 100%, yeah. And these real 70s shapes are really definitely staying around for a bit longer. So for people that are doing haircuts in the salon now, I think it's good to know the basics of like your 70s androgynous type haircuts like this, because, you know, in the 70s, we saw these on men as well, and I won't be surprised if that starts to happen again. So really understanding that shape, I think, is also a key thing. And like anything and always, like I said, I'll put the other one, a picture of that on my Instagram stories as well. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to give me a message, and I always help whenever I can.
Love it, Rory. Thanks very much, mate. Superb as always. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
See you, Rory. Cheers, mate. Speak soon.
Bye.